Welcome to the UpLevel Podcast, Kiran.
Thanks for having me, Christy.
Thanks for saying yes. So it was kind of an unexpected, we had a meeting for another purpose and we ended up in this brilliant conversation. I was like, Kiran, we need to hit record on this. We need to learn from all this wisdom that's just oozing out of you. So thank you for jumping on the UpLevel wagon so fast. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Super happy about it.
Yeah. And there's so many different places where I know we'll end up today based on that conversation we had and some of the back and forth. Let's dive in with your particular definition of right relationship, since this is the context we're in this season.
Well, it's a great question. I hadn't really heard this term until you had introduced it. So I was trying to wrap my head around it and kind of understand where I'm coming from. And I think that it's a very multi-layered concept, right? Because there's relationships in so many different aspects of our lives, whether it's our relationship with ourselves, with our families, with our colleagues at work, with our communities, and with our environment. There's just so many places where the word relationship intersects with our lives. So I think depending on the dimension, I have different thoughts and I feel differently depending on which dimensionality we're talking about. So I guess we'll dive into that as part of the conversation.
We certainly will. Well, let's actually dive in. A lot of your career has been spent in tech and specifically over the past many years leading people inside tech organizations. So when we start to think about this concept of right relationship in the context of leadership, how would you apply it there?
Well, that's really interesting because one of the things I noticed on LinkedIn, you see a lot of leaders posting, some of their experience, especially more senior leaders that might be more in the later stages of their career or post-career. And I saw one post that really resonated in a way that I was like, I really disagree with this post. And it was, a leader basically saying, well, the relationships you have at work are work relationships. And those relationships will never be at the level that you have with your family or other people in life. And, it kind of, I had a different perspective. And my perspective was, these are people that I spend a lot of time with. And why should it be limited to not being as meaningful relationship? And I felt very strongly that that's different for at least from my perspective. And I think every person, obviously treats these relationships differently. But for me, it's been very rewarding to have relationships lasted many years over many different jobs and people who I've stayed in touch with for most of my life from work relationships. And I find that to be long-lasting friendships. And I feel lucky that I've had that opportunity. And I wish that on for others.
A big part of the work we do through UpLevel and coactive coaching, which is how you and I originally met, is really supporting people to work with the whole human, because we are human beings that work, and gone are the days that we can compartmentalize. I know many of us were brought up in a way that we were meant to, and really since the onset of the pandemic, those barriers have come down and continue to come down. And so like this concept of being human, what would you say to that, and being human at work specifically?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting concept, and I've just been, hearing this phrase "being human" much more lately, and sometimes where the context can be, there may be some misunderstanding, and in the work context, it may be related to some level of conflict, right? People coming from different perspectives, holding on to their perspective and not seeing other people's perspective, and sometimes, when we hold on to these complex or abstract perspectives or our strong beliefs, we sometimes discount other people's beliefs, right? And being human is, in some ways, is really being able to hold those different perspectives and being able to hold our own at the same time. And that's something that I've been trying to understand more, because if you think about the concept of being not human, it actually helps us understand being human better, right? And so, if you think about animals, they don't necessarily understand where someone else is coming from, right? Or another animal is coming from. And so that empathy is really a key aspect in my mind. But there's so many layers to being human as well, and so many aspects to that. Um, I'm curious about your perspective, Christy, on this, because I know you talk to many leaders, and I feel like this comes up, and there may be some dimensions to being human that you may be able to share.
Thanks, Kiran. You're turning the mic over. I appreciate that. Well, I think this is like my purpose, is to bring humanity into the workplace. And part of that is because when I started my career over 25 years ago, I remember being actually told that it wasn't appropriate to be human in so many words. So part of that meant it wasn't okay to be vulnerable and say, I don't know. Like, I don't have the answer. There was a directive and also modeling of leaders have all the answers. Leaders are not vulnerable. And when I say vulnerable, it's not just like maybe showing some emotion, but it's vulnerable to say, I don't know. And is specifically in different contexts. So I think part of being human and bringing our whole selves into the workplace is space for the vulnerability of not knowing. It's space for the realness of having emotions or energy that moves through our systems during the day at work. And whether it's like an emotion of celebration and excitement, whether it's some sadness or anger. I mean, one of the reasons why I train leaders in these coaching skills is because I think it helps us to create conditions for humans at work versus we are robots who go into a place and just like an assembly line. My whole like being gets nervous and constricted when I think about how I started my career. And again, this is what motivates me to do this work. And so when I work with leaders like you and your colleagues who, again, been brought up in tech, which might be more of an environment where it is linear and there's more problem solving. I mean, you're rewarded for being extraordinary problem solvers. And whereas coaching is more about helping others find their own solutions. So it's just a different way to approach work. And I think it brings more humanity. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox there.
Oh, no, no. I appreciate you sharing that perspective. One of the things that that I think brings more humanity and vulnerability and trust is just sharing more connection before we try to get things done, right? And so I learned this from my younger daughter's principal, and what they do is she has a concept of connection before content. And I love this concept. And it's one of the things to be human is we need reminders to be human sometimes when we're in this working world. And so, small phrases like that can have a big impact, because you get into the practice of saying, okay, before we jump into the tactical, how are you doing? How was your weekend? Right. I love to have meetings on like Mondays with the team where the first thing we talk about is how was your weekend? Because what that drives is this humanness that is the foundation, right? You're vulnerable. You talk about something personal, and that builds trust within your team. And I think what a lot of leaders don't understand is you can have a good experience doing the work where there's trust and energy and humanness,
Yeah.
or you can have a bad experience doing the work and you can get the same results, and maybe you get more results even in this situation where you're not that happy. But what's really important is what's the overall experience and what's the longevity of your teams? Will people want to stay? And that's important for your investment in your teams. I like to use the analogy of cleaning the toilet. I'm like, I used to just like clean the toilet just to clean the toilet, and I didn't really like cleaning the toilet. And then I shifted my mindset around it, and I started cleaning the toilet, listening to music, having a podcast going or something like that. And I'm always thinking, I always use this analogy. I'm like, do you want to clean the toilet and have fun doing it, or you want to do it and be this miserable thing? And you can get the same exact results. So like leaders that are optimizing for results, I think are missing the point. Is what I've started to kind of realize these days. Yeah.
I love that analogy. It's making me think of this saying, like, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Mhm. Interesting.
So it's a really interesting place for, I think, all of us to look is these more mundane tasks, whether they're at work or, in our home life, to tune in. How am I relating, to go back to right relationship? How am I relating to this task and this responsibility? And is there a mindset that could bring a more connection? Because I like that word, and so I know you have begun to write a book about how impactful it is to make connection with people. So this is really interesting, and giving our topic and where we are in the conversation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, yes. The book. Someone on my team had told me, "Hey, you're always building bridges. You're always building relationships and making new connections." And
Yeah.
if people are familiar with some of Malcolm Gladwell's books, there's this concept of connectors. And I consider myself someone who really values relationships and building new relationships. Um, and the analogy for this is really like, I think of each person as a different type of spice, right? And who wouldn't want to experience every spice that the world has? And why not have curiosity about the next person that you meet, and have interest in that? So I started writing a book about how important it is for us to have human connection, first of all, because there's a lot of science around this. How and a lot of people experience the opposite of it during the pandemic. So we're more acutely aware of that experience. And also, kind of sometimes there's these barriers that make it hard for us to build connections with people, right? We may be judging ourselves or judging them or jumping to some conclusion or feeling like I don't have enough time for this. I have other things to do. But one of the things I love doing, I think it was last summer, I would just go on walks with my older daughter in the neighborhood, and we would just stop and talk to random neighbors. I didn't know them. We would just, obviously we're in the neighborhood, we're going on a walk, and there are two of us. So there's all this contextual information that really helps the other person feel at ease, right? That, okay, this is a neighbor. They're just saying hi. And then it brings community together, but it also is fulfilling for us and them. And I really drove this home with my daughter, because one day we were going on a walk in the neighborhood, and she really needed to go to the bathroom. And I was like, well, we know these people at this house. We've talked to them before. Why don't we knock on the door? And they said, oh, sure, come and use the bathroom. And then afterwards, I was like, see how important it is? Because that concretely like solidified it in her mind. She had this really bad need, and your neighbor's there in this moment of need. And so the relationships aren't for that self-serving purpose necessarily, but it's part of giving and taking within life, right? Like, so I think it's really important. And I love meeting people in places where they can't get away from me, like the elevator or on the bus. And I have lifelong friends from some of those situations. But then some of my close friends are like, you're that person. I hate it when someone does
Who's in the elevator and strikes up like a deep conversation, and you're like, I just want to get into my apartment or into the meeting and not have a chit chat. Yeah.
So
Well,
there are other perspectives.
yeah, I'm sure there's other perspectives, but I love what you're saying. And a theme that's come through this season, no matter what context the guest is coming from, is what you're speaking to. And I love the way you're illustrating it. It's this idea of reciprocity. And listeners who've gone along for the ride this season, they've heard me talk about the infinity loop of reciprocity. And it's just little things like that when we take the time to connect human to human. And then there might be a need. And, something as simple as like, I'm on a walk and I need to go to the bathroom, or it could be something far more significant. And we all know that we're living in times where we really need each other. because there is a lot of complexity and there is a lot of chaos and there's a lot going on. So I love where you're pointing us, how connection is a pathway to reciprocity. It's a pathway to creating community. And we just never know when that infinity loop is going to be coming back our way. So the give and the take. So when's this book coming out? Like, how long do we have to wait for this?
This might be a long wait. My older daughter is writing a fiction book about dragons, and she's about 10 times farther than I am in my book. So yeah, she's written 50,000 words, and I'm closer to like 10,000 words. So it's going to take me a while, but yeah, if life allows and I put the energy into it, I'm sure. And maybe someone will kind of poke at me and say, "Hey, I would really like to read that book."
Yeah. Hello, I'm poking at you right now. I would love to read this book, and the 13,000 listeners would like to read this book. This is like, yes, please. It is needed. We need this right now. Kiran, talk to us about the context of right relationship as a father and parenthood. What are you learning there?
Oh wow! I'm so happy that you brought this topic up, because I think what right relationship is so meaningful when you bring it into your home life, right? The relationship that I have with my wife and my daughters. I have two daughters. One's 9 and one's 12, and it's a constant challenge, honestly, because it creates this growth in you, because you're constantly bumping up against your limitations, and they make sure of that, and that makes you a better person. I really feel being a father and a husband has made me a better person, and I think this is related to the conversation of needing others, of having these right relationships. Those needs don't make us weaker; they strengthen us, and we are also needed as well, right? My children and my wife, they also need me for the things that I'm good at, and I need them for all the things that they're good at, that they bring into my life in terms of happiness. And it's a constant journey, right? I love this book called The Daily Dad that I started reading, in terms of like, it's got all these philosophical quotes and concepts to help you learn to be a better father. And I think there's this constant learning journey that you go on as a father and husband. And that constant learning, yeah, gives you more appreciation for life, right? And that's what that's what I can say. It also makes you very humble, right? Because you make mistakes constantly.
Yeah. And these relationships, I call them like these most sacred relationships, they, in my experience, they are mirrors. And you're pointing us to this, like to the parts of ourselves that, it's like, okay, I gotta do a little work there. And so the part where you say where it can be challenging, because having mirrors show us these parts of ourselves, but that's what makes it sacred. And I feel like that's the context of right relationship, is viewing these relationships. And this can go true for our colleagues, the people that, we're leading, the people we report into. They're always mirroring, I believe, parts of ourselves that, okay, that part needs a little bit of attention, a little bit of maybe love or integration. And I just think about an experience that I'm navigating through work right now. There's like a big change that's about to happen. And I notice it brought up this reactivity in me. And the reactivity was like, it was judgment. It was fear of, what does this mean for my part of the business? What does it mean for my livelihood? I think that goes back, for a lot of reactivity. It can elicit our fight or flight, our survivor self. And so in the context of right relationship, one of the things I've been practicing is just like, oh, wow, look at that. Look at that reactivity. Look at what this situation and this relationship is mirroring back. And what I'm doing is telling on myself. So I'm saying to the people that this situation is related to, hey, I notice I'm feeling reactive, and I notice I have judgments, and I'm afraid. And what's been super cool is that the other people are meeting me. And what I mean by that is they're like, oh yeah, I could see how that could bring up fear. and willing to walk along the way so that it's not to try to fix it or take the fear away, because that is part of being human, but just being in relationship around it then has that, I think, survivor self turn down the volume, and the parts of myself that are more creative and resourceful can step in.
Yeah. I think this idea of the reactive or the fear, flight or flight. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, fight,
Yeah.
flight, or freeze. I mean, there's the three F's. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So there's that reactionary aspect. It comes up a lot at home, actually, because I think that especially children, they have more emotions that are intense, that are not necessarily like kind of controlled, as you will.
yeah.
And I think that creates reactions for us. One of the things that I realized more recently was that, you know, when we're at work, we kind of analyze everything, and then we write strategy documents and we kind of figure out what we're doing. There's almost an expectation at home that we shouldn't have to do those things. We shouldn't have to write anything down. We shouldn't have to like think about it in a certain more kind of way where we feel like that self-improvement is part of it. And I just, even though my wife and I have been married for almost 15 years now, I just started writing down some of our things that come up all the time, right? And then I found by just writing it down that it was helping me process that the next time it would come up, even though it's been coming up for, so many years.
Yeah.
And I felt like, why did I never do that? Is it because I didn't feel it was appropriate to take it at the same level of seriousness or like formality that I would with my work? So I think we have certain biases around, this is a work relationship, this is a home relationship, this is a relationship with a neighbor. And then those biases can sometimes hold us back from having a better relationship, a better quality relationship, because we make these assumptions that we shouldn't use all our tools. We shouldn't be our full selves. And because of the context. So you can see that in the theme with the leader that said, oh, I'm not going to be true friends with these people, or or with the father that says, I'm not going to take this as seriously as I would a project at work, right? And so that there's kind of this concept of, is it a right relationship because you're actually kind of putting yourself in a box that this is the right father relationship, and you're kind of labeling yourself and limiting yourself. That there is that risk that we have because of those biases, I think.
That's brilliant. It's making me think about our capacity as humans and as leaders. And I think sometimes for me, the amount of capacity I have for my work and the people that I'm collaborating with, it's big, and I give it my all. And so sometimes in the home life, I'm like, I just want a break. I want to be lazy and not use the tools, like you said, and not apply the especially, as coaches, as we both are, and we have like treasure chests of all these leadership development things. Sometimes I do just want to be like, I don't want to. I just want to like chill and watch Netflix and be reactive and, be a little bit sloppy. And sometimes I think that is okay. But I'll tell you, exploring right relationship for coming up on the 6th month, and I haven't stopped exploring it because we're just learning so much, Kiran, and talking to people from all different contexts and applying this lens. What I am learning is I need to grow my capacity at home too, because the people in my home life deserve that same level of care and respect and honoring. And it's like, the workshop never ends. It just never ends. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's one of these really big challenges in life, because sometimes we put some of our highest energy hours into our work, right? So this idea of, I want to recharge, I want to take a break, really resonates with me. Netflix definitely has influence in the night, and pulls me in personally too. So, it is really a challenge, but a part of it is the same tools we teach our family members, right? In terms of like, how do we transition? How do we prepare ourselves? I noticed when I was working from home a lot, that if I just took an extra minute or two before just went upstairs from the basement to start, going into the next phase, if I just took a minute or two, the way I could show up was so much better, right? And
Yes.
and there's also these ideas of, trying not to control, because at least for me, culturally, I have more of a you know uh, belief that as a parent I should control things more, right? And that is something that I've had to kind of realign myself and like retrain myself and relearn, so that that my children can have the freedom up to a point, right? Like until some boundaries, but give them more creative license, and so that we can have more fun together, right? And my wife is particularly good at the fun part. So
Yeah.
it's funny because at work I feel like I'm the fun person, but at home I'm the serious person. So there's these strange, like,
Yes.
different sides to yourself that you see
Yes.
as part of
Yes.
that reflection as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the work that you're really passionate about. I know you do a lot of strengths work with the teams and the folks that you work with. And specifically, I'd love to hear maybe a story of how you're seeing that play out in this moment in time that we're all working and living through.
Oh, absolutely. Be happy to. StrengthsFinder, I had come across it probably 7 or 8 years ago at work. There was an activity, and I found it to be. It really. It has a part that feels a little bit like a horoscope, just to be fair, where you're like, oh, is this really true? Like, if I took this tomorrow, will it be different? However, I feel like it's a really powerful way of reflecting on things that you're strong at, and in potentially investing in those. So, for example, one of the strengths that's the most cryptic is called woo, which is one of my strengths, which is winning others over. Which is no surprise since I like to meet people. It's all about building bridges and building relationships. And I believe the strengths can help people shift from this mindset of focusing on our weaknesses and trying to shore them up. So I oftentimes facilitate StrengthsFinder for teams. I find that to be really fulfilling for the teams, and I've customized it over time to be something that's really fun.
How do you think specifically your coaching capability and skill set impacts this concept of right relationship?
I'd like to. It's hard to tell because you don't always know what's going on in other people's minds, and as a coach you learn a lot more about how to navigate the journey with others. um but it's a concept which I believe, as a coach, we're helping others with the aspect of their self relationship to themselves, right? And this is where I feel like, as a coach, I'm on a very long journey, because I need to improve my own relationship with myself, and whether it's self-care or understanding and reflection, so that we can better, as coaches, better enable others to have that reflective time. And also, because the way someone thinks about the world and themselves has such a big impact past themselves. So it's kind of strange, because you need to really start with that inner world and what's going on inside their minds and their feelings. So I don't know if that answered your question, Chrissy, but that's kind of the way I'm looking at it.
No, I love that. And the piece around supporting people to be in right relationship with himself. That's a big part of what I'm hearing you saying. Like the coaching has that impact. And maybe you could share specifically, you listed a few things, but what are some of the practices you have as a leader in this moment in time that are supporting you to be in right relationship with your own self?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Now I feel like I'm getting coached. Yeah.
We aim
Um,
for it to be a combo of an interview and maybe a little coaching that comes out. Yeah, can't help it. It's in the DNA now.
I have been trying to become more present. So I think that that's something that is really important for all aspects of life. But as a coach, you want to be present with those that are around you.
Yeah.
And there's also this challenge that we have that we're thinking about the future, we're thinking about the past. It's hard to stay in the moment. It's hard to hear every word that is coming in. Um, you know, and I think that is where being a good leader is really being present, really hearing what people are saying, paying attention, and that takes a lot of energy, right? And that requires us to take care of ourselves enough to be present, and that means we need the downtimes, that recovery time, and so when we tell ourselves, "Hey, we're tired," like we actually do need to find a way to take care of ourselves. Like I personally enjoy taking walks. And I like to do it even year round. And I love I think we have this idea of Walktober in October, and just the extra motivation you get that other people are walking, and that also helps with the community aspect. So
That's so cool.
finding ways to self care by yourself, for yourself, and also self care in a way that's social, are important aspects to me. I jumped around a lot to try to answer your question. I hope I didn't
No.
evade it.
Oh no, you didn't at all. That it's super helpful. Yeah, and that's been a theme. The theme around getting outside, moving, being present, and community. These are all ways that we can support balancing, rebalancing our ecosystem internally, externally. And so I think whether it's like you're leading in the workplace or it's in your community or at home, it's like how are you supporting yourself to find that equilibrium so that you can do it with those around you. That's awesome.
I wanted to jump back into the team aspect because that's
Yeah.
something I'm very passionate about in terms of team
Yeah.
coaching and right relationships and teams at work. I think there we spend a lot of times talking about roles and responsibilities of individuals, and there's a lot of definition around that. There's a lot of incentives around that, and there's very little in terms of guidance around the team dynamics that a team should be aiming for. What's the vision of a good team? It's not very clear to people, and so I do think there's a lot of opportunity to build that story for a team and to write their own version of that, right? What do we want our relationships to look like? How do we want to operate together as a team? What do we value? What are the practices that we want to hold? And how will we evolve, right? That I think is such a great opportunity that, and especially being in tech for so many years, I feel like there is a coming wave around how teams work that hasn't really landed at larger companies. It's probably happening a little bit at the smaller startups where the teams are smaller and they're so scrappy. But I'm really excited to see where that goes in the future.
I think that's such an important place for us to look is the right relationship within the team dynamic. And where you're pointing us to is, we call it this concept of designed alliance, where we're really asking each other what brings out the best in ourselves. How do we like to receive feedback and coaching? How will we be with each other when stuff goes off the rails? Because it's going to happen specifically because these are the times we're living through. So thank you for pointing us there. I think that's a really important reminder, and the same can apply to our home lives, the folks that we're living with, having those kinds of conversations. And you're also pointing us to creating a compelling vision. So what will it be like when we've, completed the project the way we want to complete it? What will we be celebrating in 1 year's time so that people can actually project themselves into that future state? I think we know by now there's so much science about how powerful our minds are and our whole beings to like project there, and that fosters our ability on all the levels to reach that vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the journey is very important, right? There's a lot of goal setting and goal achieving, and that becomes so much of our focus that the journey gets lost sometimes, and that is really important because sometimes the goal changes, sometimes your vision doesn't happen, and if you don't invest in the journey itself, right, then you kind of miss out on the opportunity in life, and that could be a waste. So yeah.
See that? Thank you for bringing that, because I feel like that puts a bow on like being humans at work. Because yes, there's goals we're after. We are all working on these incredible projects that need to, get stood up and put out in the world. And there is this importance of right relationship and being together in a journey of it. It's not just the race to the end, but it's like, who are we going to be in the process of getting there? And how will we be with each other and for each other when things go great and when things don't go so great? Because at the end of the day, I don't think any of us are going to reflect and say, like, notice so much about the end game, but it's going to be like, who was I as in pursuit of the end game? So, that being said, what could you share about right relationship and technology in this moment in time? What are your 2 cents on that?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting area. Um, one comment before we jumped into the technology part. One thing that is interesting is this concept of right, right? When we think of right, it doesn't mean perfect, and I think in the a lot of people that work in tech have a tendency towards perfectionism, and so making sure that we understand that relationships have their bumps, they have their challenges, and I think just framing it as it doesn't need to be perfect to be a right relationship is really important. And I think that's a good segue into our relationship with technology as people,
Yeah.
because, as we engage with technology, increasingly I find myself challenged by my phone. And this is really interesting because the phone is meant to be more of a tool, and it's not really a phone at this point. It's more of a tablet that I once in a while take a phone call on.
Yep.
It's more of
Oh yeah.
a computer that just never leaves your side. And you can kind of, growing up with computers that weren't even connected to each other. And then, and now they're literally like in your ears and in your mind, as close as they can possibly get today. And it will only, that bridge will only keep uh, getting shorter, and the connection will become more and more. And because technology is not a biological uh, element, right? Our relationships as biological beings, right, to technology is very different, and there's this so much differential between us as humans and technology that there's this friction, right? You can keep a computer on all the time, you can keep your phone on all the time, and it can keep going all the time, and that can be tiring. We as people need time to recharge also, but technology doesn't need that downtime as much, and so we need to have a right relationship. In my mind, is how do we make sure we're able to be our best versions of ourselves and not kind of devolve into sucking ourselves into technology in a negative way, right? Like, a good example would be like you get addicted to some game or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
and then, how many hours are you playing on that game? And reflecting on that is helpful for me to be like, oh, I spent a bunch of time shopping this week. I didn't realize it took me that much time to like pick out a pair of pants online
Right.
or something
Right.
like that. Right. And so getting some practices around our relationships with technology, similar to our other relationships, trying to bring in some of those tools to this relationship that doesn't look like a relationship necessarily. Right. When we think about our relationship with people, we're more mindful of it. But I think with our phones, it can, or other pieces of technology, we may not be that mindful about it. And it may have more of an impact on us as humans than we realize. Um, and so I don't know if I answered that question deeply,
You
but yeah,
you did, and it's going back to when you were talking about right relationship stems from self and caring for self, and so I think this is just another part of it. Living through these times is having an awareness of our relationship to technology and where we are out of balance with it. That's what I really hear you saying. Hey, let's check in with ourselves. And the doom scrolling, that's something I know I'm guilty of, as a way to numb out after like really big moments, days, weeks. And it is a constant practice to call myself out. And so I think we're inviting folks just to tune in to themselves around, okay, what does the right relationship, and remember, we can replace that word with balanced, with harmonious, with aligned, right? It's not just like
right.
right wrong, it's more about being in alignment. So what relationship does one want with technology? And given that so many of us are spending our days on it because that's how we are making a living, and it's how we're getting our purpose, our products, out into the world. So I love that you're pointing us there. I think that's really important, and it's an important piece of this context of right relationship.
Yeah.
Karen, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, you go.
Um,
You go.
yeah, and I think it's important to be intentional, right, with our relationship with technology, because there are times where it's so powerful as helping us unlock our creativity, right? We use it in so many ways to
Yeah.
unlock our creativity and
So
make
powerful.
big impact. And then there are times where it can be a little bit like the junk food, or like the chocolate that you need to have at the end of the day when you've had a long day. But now you're on you're on your phone rewarding yourself, but maybe it's not for your best version of yourself. And so yeah, it's a long journey. But
It's a long journey, and there are so many benefits. I mean, we're in one right now, but you're in California and I'm in Costa Rica. We're able to have this conversation. Like, yay.
yeah,
There was a moment in our lives where that wasn't a possibility. So, and then folks are going to tune in from, all different places. So, yay to that and all the other benefits of technology. But I appreciate, let's bring some consciousness to it. So, as we're wrapping up our time together, what are some final words of wisdom you'd like to offer us around the context of right relationship and, today's up level?
good. Which is such a great question. You know, I would say that, and I think you've touched on it a few times, Christy, is around vulnerability. And being vulnerable is such a powerful way to build relationships very quickly. Um, Sharing something deeply about yourself with someone you want to build a connection is is one of the most important ways that you take risk, but you also get the benefits of. And so when we look at the web of all these relationships, the 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 part that puts light through it and like really makes it very powerful is really building trust through vulnerability and showing the side of yourself that doesn't have that protection, right? Taking those defenses down.
Yeah. That's so helpful. Kiran, you're just such a gift to this world. I'm so grateful that our paths crossed again. I feel like we could geek out, you and I, on all of this for many, many more minutes and time. So I hope to do it again. And thank you for just jumping in and saying yes and trusting us, from trusting me to have this conversation with you. Appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And as always, I love how the conversation evolves. I just love that.